The Dharma, incomparably profound and exquisite, is rarely met with even in hundreds of thousands of millions of kalpas. We now can see it, hear it, accept and hold it. May we realize the true mind of the Tathagata. Today is the 5th day of this 7-day session here at Mountain Gate in northern New Mexico in September 2025. In a book titled How Pandemics Wreak Havoc and Open Minds by Gianna, Palmata, who was a retired professor in the Institute of the History of Medicine at Johns Hopkins University. She wrote, "Danger has this wonderful human response, which is to think in a different way." She was actually commenting on the Black Plague in Europe, where before it happened, there was increasing control of the intellect and communication by the church, actually, and fiefdoms arose, and it was a kind of a low period in history. At the same time, the Byzantine Empire was flourishing, and many, many discoveries were taking place. There was much intellectual investigation, medicine, astronomy, science in general, all manner of things. But Europe was shut down. And then the Black Plague happened, and an incredible number of people died. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it is assumed, I think it was figured out that something like 2/3 of Europeans died in the Black Plague, which, by the way, still exists. And especially in New Mexico, but in every state, apparently, there is still the flea-carried plague. And every year in New Mexico, people are diagnosed with plague. If they're lucky, it's very hard to diagnose because it is quite similar to the flu. And some people die. Because of danger, there is this wonderful human response, which is to think in a new way. Jacques Lisseron in Buchenwald, there wasn't a minute of relief from a possibility that he would be murdered, taken out and shot, sent to the euphemist showers, which really exuded poison gas, strangled by a fellow inmate who'd lost it, or there were sadistic guards who'd sometimes stick a knife in somebody's back. The tension must have been incredible. It's amazing that as many people did survive as did survive. And of course, countless others didn't. And so finally, his body just gave out from the stress, and he was dying. He didn't know the names of the conditions that he had until afterwards, when doctors told him what they were. All he knew was his kidneys felt like they were going mad. His intestinal tract felt like there were knives and scissors and razor blades running through it. His face was all swollen up with what is considered a rather dangerous disease. And as he wrote in his book, or it wasn't his book, it was the book that other people wrote chronicling what he had told them about that time in Buchenwald. He wrote, "I took advantage of this to leave Buchenwald." And what did he mean by that? He meant he dropped his ideas of what he thought he needed to do to feel safe, to feel happy, to feel free. Instead, he tuned in so completely to what was going on in his body, to the felt sense that he didn't die. He survived, and not only did he survive, but he had a profound awakening that was still functioning decades later, when in his 40s, he and his wife were killed in a car accident. In the Gulag prisons of Soviet-era Russia, there were people, here and there, just a handful of people, that did the same thing. There was no way to figure out the rationale of where they were and why they were there. And so they opened their mind to a different view and had awakening experiences. This happens to people doing Zazen, because at certain points in our practice, if we have been dedicated and really working deeply in an ongoing way, anxiety is guaranteed to come up. Anxiety, fear. And this is arising because at some level we're aware that our usual way of going about life, our usual attitude about ourselves and about other people is going. Our self-identity is going to dissolve, which is a good thing because it's false. But we attach to it so deeply. It's a conditioned reflex from how we grew up, from what our experiences were, from a need to self-protect. And so it's very precious to us. We don't even realize that we have it. But we act out in more or less skillful and unskillful ways, suffering and creating suffering, with moments of happiness perhaps in between. And when we can become free of that self-image and see deeply where we are caught in it, and gradually, over time, let go by seeing thoroughly the nature of certain aspects of that self-image and becoming a little bit more free, therefore able to open to even more aspects of our self-image. And we get to a place that is metaphorically called let go at the edge of the cliff and leap hands held high into this fiery abyss. Go right into the terror, the fear, the anxiety of the unknown, because that's what it is. It's a feeling that we're going naked into the unknown with no self-protection. But in actuality, there never was any self-protection. We can get into all kinds of challenging mind states, even become diagnosed with personality disorders because of our ways of compensating for what happened to us when we were growing up. But that is all a product of our own mind. Yes, things happen. Yes, very unpleasant, very frightening, very dangerous, very unnatural things happen. And they can be terrifying. They can be so terrifying that we're concerned that we're going to lose our life. And that's not something that we would condone. We wouldn't condone the kind of growing up that results in people feeling that they've been abandoned, that no one is there for them, and desperate to have someone, somewhere, there for them, loving them, caring for them, keeping them safe. But these things happen. And even people who grow up in healthy, happy households still may come to the edge of the cliff and find themselves in fear. Speaking of cliffs, I used to be exceedingly sensitive to the presence of cliffs. I know it was a past life experience that caused that, but I remember when I was living in Rochester at the Rochester Zen Center, sometimes when there was a free time, several of us would gather together and go down to some of the gorges that were the result of the retreating ice flows, icebergs that were part of the Ice Age. And they dug out lakes and streams and gorges. And it was a very beautiful place, and it had lots of trails, and it was a very popular place to walk in. And I remember my three friends chose to walk right along the edge of the gorge. And this particular gorge, I don't remember which one it was, but it was so anxiety-producing to me that I had to go farther away and walk along the road that skirted the gorge. I was so terrified of either myself falling in or one of them. And hiking for decades in New Mexico, in the wilderness and other places, it's like I could smell a cliff. And it would give me shivers up my legs, and I had to get far away from it. When I was a kid, how old was I? 10 years old. We lived in Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and my parents had a house built. It was a 2-story house, and we moved in before it was completed 100%. And one of the work people had left an extension ladder up to the roof. The house essentially looked fine, like it was complete, but the ladder was left there, perhaps because somebody didn't have time to take it away. And my brother and I used to play, and he would clamber right up the ladder. I would start up the first rung, and the terror would come. I couldn't even get to the second rung of the ladder. Then I used to have nightmares of falling. I would jerk awake with this terror, feeling like I just started to fall. They were repetitive. They happened many, many times. And as I grew older and ended up in Zen practice, they had quit for a while, but they were still underneath. And I started having those nightmares when I was at the Rochester Zen Center, which had a very intense schedule that didn't allow a lot of rest. And I was annoyed at this point. I was an adult. I was in my early 30s. I was annoyed with myself for continuing to have those nightmares. And I thought, all right, they're just dreams. And I'm going to, next time they come up, I'm going to let them continue and see what happened. And so, sure enough, another few days, and the dream came up. And instead of jerking awake, I let myself fall. But in the dream, I fainted, so it was as if I was out cold. Nothing was happening. That further annoyed me, and so the next time it came up, I was determined to follow it through. And so the nightmare appeared, and I started to fall, and this time I didn't faint. I could see that a long way below, there were these big, almost squarish, black rocks, huge boulders, really, maybe 4 or 5 feet square, although they weren't exactly square. And I let myself fall. And halfway down, I realized very completely that there is no difference between life and death. That whether or not I was dashed to death on those boulders or whether I survived them, there would be no difference, ultimately. It's a deep truth. After that, I wasn't afraid. In fact, later on when I moved to Santa Fe and was working for Barkman Engineering, sometimes I'd have to climb up to the top to the roof, actually, of a building, a commercial building, to check out the heating and cooling system. No problem. But the remarkable recognition that there is no difference between life and death stayed with me. And it deepened my practice. In China, there was a teacher, a Buddhist teacher, who lived in remote areas and had a following of people dedicated to his teaching. And hearing of his fame, the emperor decided that he needed to come and be a sort of a diamond in his crown and teach the court Buddhism. So he sent an emissary to invite, actually, that's a euphemism, the Zen master to teach in the court. The Zen master realized that people in the court had no interest in Zen practice, and he would be abandoning the very people that were dedicated to it, that he could help propel to awakening, true freedom. And so he refused. This, of course, angered the emperor, who was not used to getting turned down. And so he sent another emissary and said, if you don't come, you're going to be executed. So the Zen master asked for a couple of weeks where he could write down what he understood about life, about Zen practice, about enlightenment, the truth of what was going on, which, by the way, is that there is no difference between life and death, except in a certain way of looking at it. In Buddhism, it says that there is no death. There is, and here the Christians have got it right, eternal life. No beginning and no end to existence. So the master went ahead and wrote down what was most important to share with his students. And then he presented himself to the emperor and was duly executed. He had no fear of being executed. Why not? Consider that. Consider that. Realizing deeply enough the truth, we will realize that we can leap off the cliff, hands held high, into the fiery abyss, but it's not really fiery abyss. And there is another story, comes from Japan. It was during, I think, the Onin Wars. And one monastery had been on one side of the fighting feud between two brothers, actually, I believe it was. And so some of the fighters had taken refuge in the temple. And the other side came to get him and decided to punish the temple and its priest, its teacher, and its monks for allowing that to happen. And so they herded him all up into the Sanmon, which is the triple gate. There are two ways to write the characters for Sanmon. One is Mountain Gate, which is ours, and the other is the triple gate, because it consists of 3 sections. 2 down below with stairs up to an overhead third, in which at Sogenji, and I believe at other temples likely as well, there is an incredible array of 3/4 size bodhisattvas, including Kanon and others. And there is a life-size, exquisite Kuan Yin up there as well, seated. She is in a different pose from the ones we're accustomed to see, where she's standing up and holding a vase filled with healing waters, and often on a lily pad or a lotus. So they were all herded upstairs into the central area, and then, because these gates were all built of wood, the wood was torched. And one of these people, one of the monks, was understandably fearful and said to the abbot, "We'll burn. There's fire." And the abbot said, "When you've realized the deepest truth, fire is the cool wind." So it's important, as we do our practice and try to hang on to our ways of perceiving, which is why there is a difficult time in practice. I should say sometimes a very long period of difficulties, as we're playing tug-of-war with the self-image and the fear of losing it. We don't understand it in those terms. We just feel that we're getting closer to the edge of the cliff and we're going to die. And that's why they call it the Great Death, because we have to die to who we think we are in order to realize the truth of who we really are. Normally it takes quite a few years for this to happen, because we're pretty entrenched in this attachment to our self-image. The self-image, unfortunately, is a source of pain and suffering. You know when it's in action when you get embarrassed. If somebody says something that is embarrassing about you or embarrasses you, that's because it's bumping into your self-image of somebody who's worthy, somebody who's okay, somebody who's good and honest and pure. and all the rest of the good things. It's there when you get angry, because some idea that was stuck in your self-image has caused you to believe that somebody has wronged you. Zen practice is quite amazing. So often when we go into it, when we begin Zen practice, we don't realize what's really going on. We may have this sense that there is something beyond that is important to return to. We may have a sense that it's something that is kind of cool to be doing. We may have a sense, because we've been reading books, that enlightenment is exciting, happy, freeing. But when we sit down on the cushion and deal with all of those misunderstandings, although there is something just beyond the veil that we could open to, that's not a misunderstanding. Although, actually, it's not even beyond the veil. It's right here now. And many people quit right at the point when stuff starts coming up. But those who are courageous and willing to face the fire continue on. And a struggle happens. But every time you struggle, every time you meet a wall and tune in to the felt sense of that wall, every time you go blank and tune in to the blankness that is an act of your self-image trying to shut things down, you are moving deeper. Have faith. And when the good times arrive, and here and there, you'll go through a really tough period of zazen, and then suddenly it'll break open, and there will be relief, and even possibly a little joy. And then you're tempted, unwittingly, without realizing it, to coast. But don't. That good experience, that happy experience, that freer experience has actually arisen because of the hard work, the tough work that you did just before it opened up. So take heart. When things get tough, there's real potential in that. And it all comes down to when there's danger, it can open minds, because we cannot continue thinking, feeling, experiencing in the same way. And you all know already about the extended out-breath, which is similar, although not quite as powerful necessarily, as Jacques Lutheran tuning in to the pain and suffering in his own body. But the extended out-breath cuts to the chase, especially if there's a curiosity, a need to know, a sense that if you reach far enough, it's going to be important in a very positive way. And the felt sense is part of that. So with these two dynamic tools, and courage, persistence, patience, sticking with it, you will come to awakening. In chunks. And I've said so many times, there's no big bang. We gain insights, some of them deeper, some of them not quite so deep. And we keep on going. And as we deepen through those insights, they get deeper. And maybe we have a satori, a yet deeper insight. To stop somewhere along the way because of that would be so painful. Because you're selling yourself short from continuing to deepen, continuing to become more and more free. So these little micro-enlightenments can lead to bigger enlightenments. And you might not even have the big one because the little ones have cleared the way so completely that you're there and don't even realize it. So keep going, keep going, keep going. Thank you for listening. We'll stop now and recite the 4 vows.